This video will take a look at the design of Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. I'd highly recommend watching my video on Uncharted 1 and 2 before this one. You're unlikely to get much out of this if you haven't seen it. This is intended as a sort of supplementary piece. Uncharted 3 is my favourite game in the original trilogy by a significant margin. If I find Uncharted 1 only borderline bearable and Uncharted 2 sort of painfully monotonous, then Uncharted 3 comes the closest to being a game I quite enjoy playing. I'm not sure I'd say I like it, but it is the only game in the trilogy which I can see myself replaying ever again once I'm done with these videos. In the previous video, I called Uncharted 1 and 2 the bare minimum perfectly executed. I think Uncharted 3 suffers from the exact opposite problem. Uncharted 3 has higher ambitions which are not fully realised. It's no longer a perfectly executed game, but I think it does aim higher in all aspects, and with a lot of success. To achieve these heights, however, Uncharted 3 makes some concessions, and the execution doesn't always rise to meet the ambition. Since not an awful lot changes between Uncharted 2 and 3 in terms of mechanics, I'm not going to put Drake's Deception through the exact same lens as the previous video. I can't divide this one into combat, climbing, puzzles, story again since I've already gone over the basics and I'd just be repeating myself. I think it'll be best to go through the third game in a linear fashion, looking through the game as it plays out, bringing up any points I want to make as the game progresses and examples come up. Uncharted 3 hold on. Can I just... I love this theme. Some of my favourite pieces of music ever written are these bombastic, adventurous instrumentals, and for me this is seriously up there with the Indiana Jones theme. He's a pirate is still the king though. Moving on, Uncharted 3 begins with a lengthy fistfight, followed by multiple chapters of simply walking around, looking at cutting-edge graphics and triggering cutscenes. It might sound strange coming from me, but this is one of the things I really like about Uncharted 3. It's confident in its ability to hold your attention with interactions other than constant gunfights and meaningless climbing sections. The melee mechanics are simple, sure, but no more so than the climbing, so why not have a few extended fistfights throughout the game? Uncharted 1 and 2 only mandated melee combat about 4 times between them, and that was always between Drake and a single enemy. Why not bring the combat up to a standard where more than one enemy can attack at once, and then place some new emphasis on the melee system? There's no reason not to. Again, I want to stress that this isn't really a melee system worthy of much praise, at least mechanically. The animation blending is impressive, as expected, but I don't find the gunplay or climbing to be engaging in these games, so when Uncharted 3 repurposes its melee mechanics and has me do that for a few minutes, I'm happy to do that, since it means I don't have to partake in yet another subpar gunfight. The same goes for the chapters with young Drake. I've said that I consider the forced walking sections pretty much just cutscenes that give you something to do with your hands. I think they need to have the series' signature snappy dialogue or amazing visuals to be interesting, but if they do at least one of those things, I don't begrudge them. Now, in a game with a strong focus on, gameplay, they should of course be just as skippable as the cutscenes. Regardless of my feelings on story in these games though, I think we can all agree if you're skipping cutscenes in Uncharted, you're missing half the point. The reason I like just walking around and triggering cutscenes as young Drake then is because I think Uncharted 3 has the best story in the original trilogy by a country mile. Yes, I'll address the main point of criticism most people have with the story, but just in terms of these 2 chapters, we learn more about these characters than we did in the previous 2 games combined. Uncharted 3's basic plot can still be summed up in the same way as the first 2 games, but this time we have to add some sentences, like a flashback shows some of Nathan Drake's life as a street rat, Sully's life as a crook, and how the 2 met. Nathan Drake is consistently urged to give up on his treasure hunt to keep those around him safe, but his obsession with death-defying adventure pushes him on, endangering those he cares about most. It's revealed Nathan's last name isn't actually Drake. He's pushing himself because he feels he needs to prove he's worthy of the name. Nathan's marriage ended because of this obsession, and his father figure is put in ever-increasing danger the longer Nathan continues his fixation on the Atlantis of the Sands. Now, I've said quite firmly that I don't believe the stories in these games make them worth playing, or that they make good use of games as an interactive medium. It must be said though, that if you are going to tell a story this way, the goal shouldn't be to tell an over-simple story and make it feel like a film. It should be to tell an interesting story, and Uncharted 3 makes leaps and bounds towards doing this. When looked at purely as a story, not a story in a game, it's pretty impressive that most of that summary I just gave is storytelling through subtext. If Uncharted 1 and 2 are Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom, then Uncharted 3 is The Last Crusade, with surprisingly mature themes of father-son relationships. Seriously, I'm sure pretty much everyone saw the indie movies as a kid, but everyone should watch Last Crusade again as an adult too. It's an excellent example of balancing a fun adventure with something a bit more meaningful and heartfelt. And if it weren't for a slip-up we'll come back to later, I'd be quite willing to say Uncharted 3's story is as good as The Last Crusade. It helps that the young Drake vignette ends with an excellent chase set piece, which tests the player on good timing, which is what I've been wanting from the platforming in these games since Uncharted 1. Not all these obstacles are timing challenges on their own, but the chase as a whole is one big timing challenge because, well, you're being chased. You need to navigate a series of obstacles quickly, not because they're all crumbling or anything, but because you're essentially on a timer. The dude's chasing you with a time limit. When you do this all in one take without dying or being caught, it feels like you've become an expert speedrunner because you really couldn't do this section much faster or slower even if you tried. It's one of the few times these games manage to give every player the exact same thrilling experience while actually demanding some degree of skill, even if it is just basic good timing. It's fantastic that the game expands on this later with a second, much longer chase too, even finding a different way to place you on a timer by making you the chaser. A lot of this isn't even climbing. Just as with the melee combat, Naughty Dog thought about the basic act of running and jumping and gave a new context to a part of the mechanics which already existed. It's about an hour into Uncharted 3, probably longer on a first playthrough, when the player finally gets to do some extensive shooting. There's not a whole lot to say about the overall design that I haven't already said, but there are a few small niggles and changes. The feel of the gunplay is better than ever, largely due to how loud the gunshots are and the sound mixing. This was something that initially confused me. It's like they were testing gun effects for The Last of Us. The reason that gunshots are usually muted a little in action-heavy movies and games is because, well, I probably don't need to tell anyone that guns are loud. Really loud. With hundreds of bullets flying everywhere, you don't want every one to be as loud as it would be in real life, because that would fatigue the viewer's ears, and in some cases blow out their speakers. This is why the sound mixing originally had me confused, but then I began to notice that it did have a noticeable effect on the feel of the gunplay. My ears might have been sick of the volume by the time I finished the game, but that was because they were feeling every bullet explode out of the gun. Compare this to the weird metallic sliding noise in Uncharted 2 and you can really see the difference. As such, this is a change I'm conflicted on. It goes without saying I love good game feel, but at the same time there are ways to emphasize repeated gunshots without just making them really loud. Some movies can precisely balance audio to pull it off really well, westerns especially, but when playing a game it's important to be able to hear other sound cues, like the beep of a grenade. At the risk of hindsight bias, I think Uncharted 4 gets this right. Shots pap out of the gun, but they're not all so loud that they drown the rest of the sound mix. Uncharted doesn't really demand that much aural attention from you though, so I'm willing to say it's at least an improvement over Among Thieves. The recoil has been changed slightly as well to add to the effect. It now makes the reticle jump upwards violently, much less smoothly than it did in previous games, which makes guns feel powerful and dangerous. With any luck, you should actually be able to feel the difference just by watching. This won't be the last time I say this. If you read one book on game design in your entire life, make sure it's Game Feel by Steve Swink. The improved feel of the gunplay makes for a sad juxtaposition when enemies don't flinch when shot. The Uncharted games have never had the best indicators for when you've landed a hit. Uncharted 1 had a slightly too comical blood spatter, which Uncharted 2 toned down, but in those games, if you were doing damage to an enemy's body, not their armor, they would always flinch, even if only very quickly. This is removed in Uncharted 3, although I think it's more likely to be a cut corner than an intentional decision, given Naughty Dog's usually stellar animation department. It's hard to overstate just how much worse the shooting feels in Uncharted 3, even after the positive changes, because of this simple difference. The guns themselves feel more powerful than ever, so it feels insipid when an enemy stands their ground after 3 shots to the gut. This sense of jankiness is carried over to Drake's basic movement and animation set. Hopefully you can see what I mean when I show him walking forwards in Uncharted 2 compared to walking forwards in Uncharted 3. The human eye is extremely good at judging speed, trajectory, and center of gravity. It's absolutely amazing when you think about it that we're able to consistently hit a baseball. The problem with Drake's walking animation is that he's constantly shifting his weight to look around, looking as though he's not quite heading in the direction you're pointing him in, with his legs sort of flopping all over the place in this one particular jog. When the controller's in your hand, he feels like he's not making proper contact with the ground. Now, we know beyond a doubt that Uncharted 3 was rushed. I think there's more to it than that, and I have my theories about why the game ended up so janky, but when I'm cutting a script down for time, idle speculation is the first thing to go. Ask me again sometime. The jankiness is very much a fact, though, and persists throughout the game, with a lot of lip sync and sound effects being way off during gameplay. Maybe you can see what I mean.
Okay, let's take a look. So much to smell.
There's just this sense that Uncharted 3 is a bunch of highly polished, disparate parts instead of a cohesive whole like Among Thieves, even just in how many place and time skips there are in the plot. It's the biggest reason I can see why people would prefer Uncharted 2. There's not much to say about the French chateau. It's got what might be the first genuine lengthy puzzle, and escaping a burning building is one of the most visually impressive set pieces in the series, but in terms of gameplay there's not much else to remark on here. The Syria section is similar to Uncharted 2's Monastery for me. I find it the most visually unappealing area in the game, but it does deserve credit for some of the better level design. It brings along with it the game's one completely new mechanic, grenade throwbacks. In Uncharted 1 and 2, enemy grenades served a subtle but important role in the combat. They were the game's way of forcing the player out of cover from time to time. Sitting behind a single piece of cover for about 40 seconds would cause an enemy to throw a grenade and force you to move. They prevented you from just finding one ideal piece of cover which gave you the best angle on all the enemies, and instead forced you to at least pop your head out for a few seconds every so often. You could call this solution cheap and lazy, but these are bare bones cover shooters we're talking about here. It works for what it is. The ability to throw grenades back fundamentally unbalances this. If the player can throw back all the enemy grenades, then camping becomes a relevant strategy. This means two things. Naughty Dog have to find another way to get the player moving around, and the thing in question has to be just as obvious and avoidable as a big red flashing grenade. Now, the guys at Naughty Dog are no mugs. Just from what you're looking at right now, they clearly don't sit around blowing raspberries all day. It's for this reason that I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and conclude that they implemented grenade throwbacks in order to challenge themselves to create better level design. I'm going to conclude that because the alternative would be that someone said, "Wouldn't throwing grenades back look cool?" and everyone else in the office went, "Dude," without considering the simple but important role grenades played in combat. The reason I'm conflicted is because the arena design in a lot of Uncharted 3 is indeed a step up from the previous games, but at the same time, enemies tend to spawn behind Drake more often, killing you before you know what's happened, creating a sort of trial and error design. You have options in the level design now, but you have to learn the enemy spawn points so that you know which options you can make use of and which will get you shot in the back. This is most evident in this part of Syria. This is a good vantage point on the entire arena, right? I've got a fair bit of ammo and I can throw grenades back now. I think I'll just camp up here. Nope, the designers dropped a shotgunner in behind you. You're dead. This means you won't stay put on your next attempt. You'll run down to the arena and start engaging with enemies properly, but the first death was, if not unfair, at least unpredictable. If there were no grenade throwbacks, this shotgunner wouldn't be here. Enemies would just pelt you with grenades. All this is to say, I think Uncharted 3 as it is now would have been more easily balanced without grenade throwbacks, but I think it does create an opportunity for the developers to find a more interesting way to force the player out of cover. If that was the intent, I admire the ambition, if not the execution. After a few more puzzles, which are actually puzzles, and surprisingly little else, I suppose there's no getting around it, I have to talk about the 90-minute non sequitur in the Shipyard, which is commonly considered to be the worst part in the series for resolving the conflict of gameplay and plot. It's a known fact that Naughty Dog definitely had to cut some significant corners to get Uncharted 3 out on time. I don't think anyone needs to be sympathetic to that when critiquing a finished product they paid money for, but regardless, this was the point when everyone figured out Naughty Dog makes their set pieces first and their stories last. Now, I think this is the correct order of priorities, because I already see a conflict between gameplay and cutscenes in a different sense. Set pieces are part of gameplay, cutscenes aren't. But in a series that's known for its high quality story presentation, it is pretty glaring when almost 2 hours of the gameplay do absolutely nothing to advance the plot. People have proposed a number of ways to fix this, remove the shipyard altogether, rearrange the events, but what gets me is that the only change this entire vignette needed was some different direction given to Nolan North's acting. Throughout Uncharted 3, after we see the flashback when Nate meets Sully, we see the relationship between the characters in a new light, and this is absolutely reflected in the writing. It's hard to demonstrate with just a few video clips, but there is absolutely a shift in how these characters act and talk around each other. Nate specifically asks Sully, and only Sully, if he's okay on a number of occasions.
Good to see you're alright.
You too.
Sully's the first to put his gun down when Nate is threatened.
Oh, god damn it.
Well, that changes things a bit, doesn't it? Now drop your guns. Why don't you go, Carter, shoot him?
No.
Wait. Just stop. Okay?
And let's not forget that Sully is willing to shoot Cutter in the head, not the arm or the foot, the head, when he starts strangling Nate.
Charlie? Charlie? No.
Get back!
Don't! Charlie, you're killing Nate. Okay, you gotta listen to me. You are killing Nate. Charlie?
The characters don't start talking to each other like a father and son or anything, but I don't think I'm reading too much into it. The main goal of Uncharted 3's story is to show just how far these two characters would go for each other. Which is why the Shipyard chapter is so disappointing. Imagine if all the events had played out exactly the same, but Nolan North had been directed to act truly desperate to find Sully before the pirates killed him. Perhaps it could have even been blatantly obvious to the audience that Ramses didn't have Sully, but Drake's desperation to get his father figure back blinds him to this, and he goes on an absolute rampage, coming to a natural conclusion with the sinking ship set piece. Instead, Drake's just the same old Drake. Maybe he's pushing himself harder, but he's still making wisecracks about pirates with rum and tetanus shots. It's not disappointing to me that this section of the game advances the events of the plot so little. It's that this section could have brought all the emotional subtext to a head and given the story its resonance, all with only a single change to one actor's direction. Instead, it became the story's easiest target for ridicule, Talbot aside. I don't think I've gone on about story this much ever, but let it be said that I enjoy a good story as much as anyone. I just see a massive chasm between gameplay and story. Because I think Uncharted 3's gameplay comes the closest to being passable, and its story is far and away the most heartfelt, if it weren't for this non sequitur and some of the less impressive gunplay, Uncharted 3 comes damn close to falling into the good gameplay, good story category. The Last Crusade is my favourite fun adventure with a heart of gold movie, and I like Sully a hell of a lot more than any of the characters in Indy, so as I say, if Uncharted 3 had plugged this hole, I genuinely think it could have surpassed Last Crusade. As it is, it's disappointing, but since the rest of the game manages to have such heartfelt subtext, it still far surpasses the first two games for me. Since having a well-presented story is one of Uncharted's main goals, it's only fair to give the gold medal to the one that manages to make that story emotionally engaging as well. It's a shame that the story is such a sticking point for most people in this area, because the first gunfight in the shipyard is far and away the best one in the entire trilogy. I cranked the difficulty up to hard for this section, and I died a lot, but I loved it. There are so many options in the level design here that every death was an opportunity to try something new. Do I climb one of the ships and grab a grenade launcher? Do I swim under the turret's fire and try to flank the gunner? Do I go over to this cover on the right? Damn, there's a turret there too. There's a shotgunner coming up behind. Do I make a break to mount the turret or dive underwater to get away? This is the only time in the game, and the whole series, when swimming is used during combat, allowing you to dive under for a few seconds to take cover. This new gimmick of the level design is combined with some of the best enemy and cover placement in the series. I'm confident in saying that there is absolutely nowhere in this arena where you can camp. Every route is met with balanced resistance. If you go left, you won't have to deal with shotgunners, but the turret has the angle on you. If you go right, the second turret is much easier to take out, but the shotgunners have a tight space to trap you in. And whatever route you take, you can always jump into the water and swim over to another. Maybe I'm overstating all this because I'm so happy to have some level design with some thought behind it in an Uncharted game, but my expectations for the gunfights in these games are so low that I really do feel I have to praise this one to high heaven. There's a lot to be said about expectations though. A lot of people really hate this fight because it's uncharacteristically complex and difficult. If you play the Uncharted games for a passive roller coaster ride, this sudden noob wall might frustrate you to no end. My first playthrough of Uncharted 3 was a grudging one. I just wanted to get this series over and done with. At the time I felt I owed it to Naughty Dog to at least see it through, for all the hours of fun they provided with Crash and Jack when I was younger. Hitting this wall frustrated me too, since, if nothing else, the first two Uncharted games had been mercifully short, and every death meant more time spent playing this one. Obviously, my opinion has done a solid 180 since then, but there is a lot to be said about expectations in the development of any piece of art. If Uncharted 3's level design was all this good, that would have set the precedent, but making only this part so fantastic is like leaving a comfort zone. It makes the best part of the entire trilogy look like an uncomfortable odd one out. This isn't to say I'd want this part removed or anything, it's just an observation. I do want to praise Naughty Dog's tech for just a moment. Anyone who's been playing games for years should recognise just how amazing it is that you can make this jump without any glitching or contextual animation. I suppose this is the same as the convoy set piece, but I guess it just stuck out to me because the ships are much bigger objects moving more erratically on the randomly generated sea. Apparently I never got the memo about killing this massive dude with a grenade launcher. I've always done it with bullets, you scrubs. Unfortunately, after all the praise I just gave the gunfight in the shipyard, the big one on the ship itself commits every sin the combat in these games ever could. Very few options, pretty much just a couple piles of boxes right next to each other, being constantly pinned down, and one-hit kill shotgunners spawning where they can flank Drake fast without much warning. It's some serious whiplash, a lightning-fast regression. The fight in the hold is also one of the worst examples of enemies spawning behind you. While the shipyard has the best combat in the trilogy, the ship itself has some of the worst. There's not a whole lot to say about the approach to the plane, though I do really dislike how Drake suggests stealth when it's actually impossible to sneak through undetected.
We just have to get through here as quietly as possible.
If the game wants a gunfight to happen here, fine, I don't mind there being a couple of guards I can't sneak past. It just really irritates me when the developers have Drake suggest stealth like it's actually possible to ghost your way through here when it really isn't. It's like the devs want players to think there's been effort put into the stealth when it's actually extremely limited. So now we come to the plane set piece. My thoughts here are mixed. I think it's probably the most visually astounding set piece in the trilogy, but I'm never able to pull it off in one take without dying. This is something I've been thinking about for a few years. When a game's main goal is to be visually interesting, a traditional death system becomes problematic. If I show you this, and then show you this again, was it more impressive the first time or the second? This is what makes Death in Uncharted a bit of a special case. Its goal is to be visually impressive, but nothing is as visually impressive the second time you see it. Where I live, I'm right next to a beautiful mountain covered in forestry. I'm sure an overseas visitor would be blown away, but I see it every day of my life, so I'm more than a little desensitized. The same applies to Uncharted set pieces. If I die in the middle of one, seeing the same visually impressive thing twice in quick succession is going to desensitize me to it. I don't have this issue with most of Uncharted set pieces. The train, for instance, is visually impressive but is still a level. It's still expecting you to shoot a bunch of dudes to advance. The plane, however, and the collapsing building in Uncharted 2 don't ask you to actually kill all the enemies, just to survive while waiting for something cool to happen. The gunfights are only here to add even more action to the scene. They're not actually testing anything. It's in these scenes I think a compromise could be made. Leave them exactly as they are, but have enemies 50% less likely to land a hit on Drake. In this way, the player can still be in control and still feel like they've scraped through by the skin of their teeth, but every player would also be able to do it in one take, preserving the visual spectacle and preventing that desensitization. Maybe you think I should just get Gud, but as I've said, I don't find any satisfaction in these corridor shooter bits, so I wouldn't mind the game secretly condescending to me in order to keep the spectacle fresh. Nate's walk through the desert is another in-engine cutscene, essentially, and it meets the goal of being amazing to look at. Again, it exists to show just how far Drake will go for Sully. The gunfights in the desert city have an interesting level gimmick in these red columns. Shooting them causes them to fall over, sometimes creating a piece of cover. They're even taught quite elegantly. There's one gunfight which has you shooting them to dislodge a mounted gun, but it's a shame they don't get taken any further, like the blue sap from Shambhala. Perhaps an arena with no cover, only columns, and you have to shoot them strategically to make new pieces of cover for yourself as you advance. Enemies could do the same, and the fight would be about preventing them from creating cover for themselves. The convoy set piece is the last big one in Uncharted 3, and it's a solid one to end on. It's still very on rails, but between the horse, the trucks, your gun, and the ability to just ride straight past some of the trucks you can jump onto, there are at least a couple of options here. It's still very much guided, but unlike the plane or ship, it won't play out exactly the same way for every player. One person might jump onto every truck, another might save Sully as fast as possible, just shooting enemies from the horse. The last fight before entering Ubar is probably the worst one in the game, with the cruise ship aside. There are a couple of options in the level design here, but the enemies have laser accuracy and multiple turrets, while you can't see 5 feet in front of you. I won't say obstructing the player's view can never work, but in this case it just tips the fight in the enemy's favour in a really uninteresting way. This is always where I die the most. The hallucinations of the Jinn in Ubar are pretty disappointing compared to the zombies and masked creatures of the previous two games. Where those enemies changed the way the game was played a little, here the Jinn are just your regular hit scan enemy with a massive health boost. The last arena you fight them in is the other place I always die a ton, and it's a totally uninteresting fight because of how boring the Jinn are from a gameplay perspective. Some of the level design in Ubar is kind of weird because it seems to think that giving you only one piece of cover is a good way to increase the difficulty. It doesn't happen more than a couple times, it's just a kind of witless thought process. Uncharted 3 ends with a terrible final boss fight against Talbot, which actually serves to bring everything I've said about these games full circle. Everyone seems to agree this fight is pretty damn uninspired, but think of it this way, it actually uses every core mechanic the series has ever had. You do some running and jumping, then you have a fist fight, which has always been the mechanic that was most likely to show you button prompts, then you climb a little bit, then you shoot a little bit, then you run and jump to the finish line. It seems like, with the final boss of the entire trilogy, everyone finally realised that these mechanics aren't enough by themselves. As I've been saying all along, they need to be combined with interesting situational design, which is why Lassie remains the best boss in the series, and that's not saying much. Now, I've been asked to make some comment on the critical reception these games received.
Cup of death will be filled for thee. Lovely.
I kind of ranted about it in the last video, but I never touched on why people can like these games so much. The conclusion I've come to here was formed from both Joseph Anderson's Uncharted retrospective and this Mother's Basement guy's very clickbaity but actually very good video on Uncharted 4. Links to those in the end slate. Joseph elegantly explains why these games are loved by people who don't play a lot of games, and busy gamers who don't have the time to learn the ins and outs of a complex set of mechanics. It's because on a first playthrough, they're designed to be intensely linear, but hide that design very well, making you feel like you're making smart and snappy decisions. Of course, the more you play games, the more likely you are to recognize how restrictive the games are on your first playthrough, and unfortunately this was my first experience of these games. I was never not aware of how choreographed everything was. Mother's Basement fills in the other blank, why these games are so highly praised by professional critics who play games day in, day out. They seem like they wouldn't have matching opinions with people who don't play a lot of games. Top paid critics like these games because they're playing and reviewing games all day, possibly 6 days a week. A narrative-driven game which you only have to devote a day to, with familiar mechanics and a concentrated dose of power fantasy, is an absolute godsend. This is why many critics latch on to linear narrative wherever possible at the expense of gameplay. It's much less taxing on an overworked brain to recognise this line of dialogue as snappy.
You alright?
Nothing that years of therapy won't fix.
Than this piece of level design as good. I mean, I just spent like an entire page explaining why. Because of this, I have to repeat that I can't and won't begrudge anyone for liking Uncharted. I could talk shit on game review culture as a whole, but I mean, I like having day one reviews available as much as the next guy, and you damn sure can't write one of these videos in a day. I went on at length about how I think these games are completely undeserving of the praise, but I'm not so naive as to believe it's all some big conspiracy. Everyone has a plainly evident, defensible reason for giving these games gushing praise. I'll only say that if playing Uncharted is the highlight of a paid critic's week, then the job doesn't sound very appealing. I want to end on a positive note by talking about the one aspect of the series which deserves universal praise and I have no criticism of. This is the porting job done by Bluepoint Games. It is absolutely flawless. Where Uncharted 1 would be pretty much unbearable on PS3 today, with massive frame drops and constant screen tearing, Bluepoint have made it run well enough that the game's few redeeming qualities aren't buried under horrendous technical issues and stupid use of the 6-axis. Grenades now work as they do in Uncharted 2 and 3 as well. The feel of the aiming controls used to vary between games, with Uncharted 3 apparently releasing in a horrible state before a patch. It's been tightened up around Among Thieves for the remaster. All 3 games run at 60 frames, and they even went as far as to add the skins and gameplay modifiers that Naughty Dog didn't have time for with Uncharted 3. These are all surface level improvements, so they don't fundamentally alter the fact that these are very flawed games, but they do make them a little easier to swallow. At this point, Bluepoint have made Shadow of the Colossus run at a playable frame rate, made MGS3 look unbelievably good running off PS2 source code, and ported Titanfall, a native Xbox One game, to a system with 1/16 of the RAM with very little compromise. The Uncharted collection had them porting code optimized to the limit for the goddamn cell processor. I think it's safe to say that these guys are some of the best in the business. Uncharted 3 is a competent game that I've probably made out to be better than it is, because my expectations of this series are so low. It suffers from all the same problems I see in Uncharted 1 and 2, just less often. For me, it's the peak of the trilogy in 3 areas: storytelling, visual spectacle, and gameplay. The first 2 were the focus of the entire series, so we could award it best in the trilogy based on that alone, but it also manages to improve in the one area I care about most. By the 3rd game, you're either on board with Uncharted's bullshit or you aren't, so it really didn't have to improve the level design and gunplay, but it does, and for that, I think I can cut it some slack. For the first time since Jak 1, I've got some further viewing for you. I mentioned Joseph Anderson and Mother's Basement, both have videos on Uncharted very much worth your time. Hyperbit Hero also has a video on the evolution of the convoy chase throughout the series. I didn't really talk about the one in Among Thieves at all, so that's worth a watch too. If I've missed anything, let me know and I'll give it a watch and maybe link it at the end of Uncharted 4. The usual links are on the screen, Twitter's in the description. As always, thanks for watching. I'd hope this one would be shorter, but I guess if there's more to say it.